I'm here with Erich Schiffmann, a world-renowned yoga teacher, author, and a great human, a friend who was nice enough to give me a yoga lesson today, and also
Teach 2 classes a week,
okay.
1 workshop a month. Feels totally full-time. Well, I've written 1 book. It's being translated into Turkish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I like that. And it's and just an aside, which is interesting about that. Like in the book, yoga book, I have people do this position a lot, and in English, I just say put your hands in prayer position, the Namaste prayer position, and so this friend of mine who's translating it into Turkish, before she knew that I was saying this, she read put your hands in prayer position, and they put their hands like this.
Right, exactly.
And it's like, oh yeah, let's.
But that also works.
This, in fact,
Okay.
I love this position.
It is. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, I know. And they also do it like this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like in the Islamic daily prayers, at one part of it, I mean, depending on where you are and which sect and so on, as they stand up and they put their hands like this, it's a certain part of the prayer. It's like an offering to God.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to watch. I mean, you can understand how these things evolved, so to speak. You know, like the prayerful mood looks like something.
Yeah.
It can look like anything, but you know, like especially when you're feeling prayerful, it's nice. You know, like you do find yourself doing this or different things.
Mudras.
Yeah. And you don't have to know what they mean, but it's like they are communicating meaning. You know, basically appreciation of life live. You know, and you're sort of giving expression to it. Like when I do the talks, I'm not really, I'm aware that I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? Like your hands do all these funny mudric shapes, and it's part of the communication. Right,
kind of like trying to say something with very limited vocabulary about the indescribable.
Exactly, yeah. And like really being clear that the words are pale and anemic, but you know, the whole presence is the communication, and part of it comes out looking like little finger shapes, or that's what people notice the most.
Right.
People will often ask.
Yoga, they go like,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you get into yoga initially, and when? How old were you?
I was 10 or 12, and my older brother gave me a yoga book for my birthday. And I remember thinking, what a stupid birthday present. You know what I mean? Like,
what Lego you got?
Yeah. Well, why did you waste my birthday present on a yoga book? You know, like, what a stupid present, was my quick thought. He doesn't remember giving it to me. I've still got the book. And for him, it was like a last minute, I gotta get Eric a yoga book. I gotta get Eric a birthday present. And I just put the book in a drawer, and I didn't even look at it until, you know, like a couple of years later, I was cleaning out the drawer, and I found the book, and it's like, oh yeah, Carl gave me this. And I was probably 13, 14 at that point. And at that point, like looking at the pictures and the yoga in the title, it caught my attention, and it gave me this little thrill of
trying it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh wow, there's something interesting about this, like magical or mystical. Yeah. And I remember like the sheen on the man's skin was different.
You recall which book it was?
Yeah, it was The Spirit and Practice of Yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like when I wrote my book, I sort of, as appreciation for his book, I titled mine Yoga, the Spirit and Practice, similar to his, of moving into stillness is where I went with it.
Yeah, that's a great book. I have it.
And just like where I got that title, which is interesting, like it's how I got the title is sort of like partly what the story's been about for me. I was already teaching yoga, and I was on a bus. I was going to the San Francisco airport to get on the plane to fly to teach a workshop somewhere. And I don't know, I get nervous before workshops. I still get nervous.
Even Elvis got nervous.
Yeah, and I like it. Like it used to be more immobilizing, but it's sort of, you know, I'm surprised when people don't get nervous, actually. I mean, Krishnaji used to get nervous before his talks. I remember on one of the talks he said, you know, and he always sat on his hands so he didn't gesticulate too much. And he said something like, I hope you're not as nervous as I am. Right. And I was, you know, I was a little surprised he said that, but it was also like, yeah, cool.
He's honest.
Yeah, and in spite of any fear that you are...
Yeah, and that very honesty actually mellows the whole thing out.
Exactly, yeah. And so I was on the bus and nervous, pre-workshop, and I was trying to, you know, just get clear on the ideas that I was going to present in the workshop, you know. What is this about really? Really? What's it about really? And I was just sort of, you know, wondering about it, thinking about it. And I got this swift little insight sentence went through my mind. And it said, and by then I'd got into the practice of carrying a notebook with me and a pen, because when an insight comes through, it's swift, it's succinct, it's clear, and I had missed so many of them. And if I tried to like write down what the insight was later, I was close. I was close, but I had this messy rendition of what was succinct clarity. And so this succinct, clear sentence came through my mind, and it said, yoga, and that caught my attention already. Yoga is a way of moving into stillness. And I thought, that's cool. So I wrote that down, and it helped clarify. And then a few moments later, the sentence continued, in order to experience the truth of who you are. And then it's like, oh, whoa, that's what it is. Yoga is a way of moving into stillness in order to experience the truth of who you are. It's like, oh, brilliant, easy, simple, clear. It's like, oh, that's what we're doing. Okay, I like that. And that's became the title of the book, and it just sort of clarified for me sort of what...
The who you are part is also part of the title, or you draw that part?
That wasn't part of the title, but it helped clarify what the title was about.
Actually, I believe the title is even more powerful without that who you are. Because that gets into a controversial philosophical discussion. What if who you is nothing, and so on and so forth. But the first part is... Right.
So...
And so you got the book as a child, it intrigued you, you started doing postures based on the pictures?
So I saw the pictures in the book and I started trying them out. I liked the philosophy. I don't remember what the man wrote, but it was probably some you know, generic yoga philosophy. But I started doing the poses, and I remember being in my room, and I was actually standing in a doorway. The doorway in my room was here, and I was doing uttanasana, like where you stand up and you fold forward and you try and touch your nose to your knees, for example. And I wasn't very close. My legs were stiff back then. So like I could bend backwards easily. Like I'm more of a back bender. And the forward folds were more tricky. But I was working it and gently. And then one day I was pretty close to getting my nose to touch my knees. And I thought, hey, I'm pretty close. Why don't I just go for it? Gently. So I pulled myself in there deeper and I touched my face to my legs. And when I stood up, I got this subtle, gentle, overwhelming, euphoric little rush.
Right.
And it wasn't woozy, but it's like, whoa, like something had happened. And within moments, I began to think of myself as somebody who was into yoga.
Wonderful.
So in that moment, you know what I mean? And I was still living at home, and then it was like soon after that.
You were like 10 or 11, right?
No, I was like 14
Okay.
at that point. And I'd been reading, many spiritual books at that point. I was into Yogananda a lot.
Right. So did you actually take a class at some point? When did you take your first?
My first class wasn't until I went to Brockwood.
Oh, and that was how old were you by that time?
I was 18.
Okay, so for like 4 or 5 years, you just basically were self-taught.
Right. Somewhere in there, my best friend gave me a book by Krishnji, Think on These Things.
Of course.
and I just fell in love with it.
Yeah, that was my first book too.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, God, this is the best book I've ever read, and I would share it with people every once in a while. But for years there, Krishnji was the only thing I read, and I would go to the Bodhi Tree bookstore here in LA when I could. Like, I didn't have a driver's license yet, but whenever I could get down there, and I was at the Bodhi Tree bookstore one day, and a new book I'd always go to the K-book section, and a new book had come out called Brockwood Talks. And I think it was from that first year that they had the Brockwood Talks, whatever year that was, 72 or 3 or 4. I mean, it was early, or 69 or something, whenever Brockwood started, but it was that first year. And on the back it said, we just started this school, Brockwood Park. I read the transcripts and I thought, wow, there's nothing else I would rather do than be a student at that school. I wanted to meet Krishnamurti. I wanted to learn yoga the way he did it. I wanted to eat the way he did. I wanted to dress the way he did. I wanted to meet people that were into him. I wanted to meet him. Like, I wanted to study the guy, basically. I wanted to see what the teachings looked like for someone who was living them. So I wrote to the school, just this handwritten letter, teenager kid from Southern California. And I remember putting the letter in the mailbox and making this little wish, like, please come true. and thinking nothing would come of it, like they wouldn't even respond. A few weeks later, I got a letter back. I couldn't believe it, and they said, yeah, please come and be a student at our school. I was thrilled. My parents didn't understand why I wanted to go there. I couldn't really explain it to anybody. I couldn't even really explain it to myself, except, wow, this is, there's just this strong magnetic pull. I gotta do this, Mom. And so I went to the school.
And money was not a problem. It would cost like $6,000 or something at that time.
Oh, way less than that. It was, and they ended up giving me a half scholarship.
Oh, that's nice.
So that helped. Dorothy and Doris picked me up in Petersfield.
Michael Rogers had the same story. Except he arrived like at midnight and they were upset. But once they saw him, they were like, Hello.
Yeah. And they drove me to the school, and I remember they said, you know, Christian G sits over here at lunch. You know, when you come down tomorrow, you'll see him sitting over there. And so that first day, the next day when I came down to lunch, I knew he was going to sit over there. And so I positioned myself in the room where I could spy on this guy, you know, like, you know. Mm-hmm. And I saw him come into the room, you know, and he had his little plate. And he was like looking around, sort of like as though he was, you know, looking to see somebody. And then our eyes caught, and he went, he gave me this salute.
The same one he would give you later on.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just like, and it was like,
right.
I saw the sage seeing me. Mm. He didn't reject me. And in fact, you know, he was like...
You felt affection.
Yeah, I felt like he saw the real me, you know, and I wasn't rejected, and it was like, oh, wow, awesome, yes. Yes. Thank you. You know, and it felt like, again, like in that moment, suddenly I was different. Someone that I totally admired saw me, welcomed me. So that was day one, right. You know, first 5 seconds, right. Major transition point. And then I ended up being at Brockwood 7 years basically. Wow. But one of the years I lived in Madras, studying yoga. So I was at Brockwood and as a student for 1 year. He took me up to his room. I think I got to talk to him 3 times. And then once I'd been in India for the summer. And I got back to Brockwood after being in India, and he wanted me to teach him everything that Iyengar had just taught me.
Okay.
That was fun. So I got him, we were up in the tower in the yoga room. So Krishna Ji wanted me to show him what Iyengar had taught me that summer. Mm-hmm. So Iyengar was starting to use chairs a lot. Uh-huh. So I got one of those folding chairs out, and I had Krishnji slide through it and do a back bend through the chair. And he was in there for a couple minutes, and doing this nice back bend, and then I helped him get up out of it. It's sort of hard to get out of the chair, right. And even if you're a kid, and he was like in his 70s at that point, I helped him get up out of the chair. And then the next day, in the dining room, the next day and for about a month, every day after, he would always give me this little salute. And he used to call me old boy. Good morning, old boy. And he said, like every day, isn't the chair a wonderful invention?
So he liked that?
He liked the thing, yeah, doing the back bend through the chair, yeah.
So you had private interviews?
Oh, right, and so that was the other thing. So yeah, so he had invited me up to his room, and he was showing me the pranayama that he does, and I sort of forget what it was, except that I remember a lot of it was to keep his voice good, and there were odd pranayamas. They were sort of he'd make these weird sounds, and he was recommending meditating with your back against the wall, and you know, you snuggle your seat back into the corner, sit up, and it's easy to be erect and easy cross-legged position. And I remember, you know, I was like a teenager, early 20s. And I remember him suggesting using the wall. And the little thoughts that were going through my mind were, oh, come on, you don't meditate. You're not supposed to meditate leaning against the wall.
It's not for real.
Yeah, right. That doesn't count. You know what I mean? There I am talking to the sage, and in my mind just sort of...
It's like riding a bicycle with these side
training wheels, But now, you know, like it's really nice with the wall. Like it's a good way to do it. So he would do his pranayama sitting with his back to the wall.
And the first time you met him, did you feel a lot of affection? Because when I first met him, we shook hands. It was like love was pouring out of his eyes. He had just finished the talk, so he was on fire. And he just shook my hand for a while, looking in my eyes and smiling and talking. And just the amount of love was just incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't quite like that, but equivalent. But it didn't look like that. But it was. Yeah, I was.
But you felt affection.
Oh yeah.
And he wasn't holding back, showing affection.
Right. But it wasn't. But it was appropriate to the moment.
Yeah, because this was a public talk he just finished for 3,000 people. And it was like rock and roll.
Yeah.
So you went to India and you took some lessons. Did you take some yoga lessons in Brockwood? They had a yoga teacher there?
So that first year, Jim Fowler was the teacher.
I know him.
Jim was great. I think everyone has special love for their first yoga teacher.
Right.
And Jim and I were friends, you know, the whole time that I was there. So I did classes with him, and at the end of every class, he would do little stick figure drawings of what we did together, and he would give me the paper, and that's what Desagachar used to do, sort of give you the class. I've got the pile of papers somewhere still.
And you yoga teachers are very good at drawing these things very quickly.
And so I was there as a student for 1 year at Brockwood. Right. And towards the end of the year, I asked Krishnaji, I told him I wanted to learn yoga more seriously, and what should I do? What do you recommend? And he recommended to go to study with Desagachar. So I wrote Desagachar a letter. A few weeks later, got the response, yes, please come to Madras. Next thing I knew, I was in Madras, and I lived there for a year. Very interesting year. Desagachar was 34 at that point. He was just a baby, you know what I mean? He was new to teaching. Krishnamacharya was still alive. Krishnamacharya was always sitting on the porch saying his mantra. Sort of, I forget what it was. I used to know what it was. And I would salute him. I'd come in, I'd ride my bike over to their house, park the bike, salute him as I come into the house. There was never any response from him.
He was busy with his mantra.
Yeah, but I thought it was totally cool. I thought, wow, this guy is cool. I was there for a year, and when I left Madras at the end of the year, I was going to go back home to California. But I was stopping at Brockwood just to say hi to the people. And when I got there, they said, well, Jim decided not to teach yoga anymore. We don't have a yoga teacher. You're fresh out of Desagachar school. Would you like to be the yoga teacher? And it was like, whoa, I can't, you know, like this magic door opened, and it's like, I couldn't think of anything I would rather do. You know, so it was nice because I didn't have to personally orchestrate it or force things to happen. But the magic door opened, I said yes. I flowed into being back at Brockwood. And I taught yoga there for 5 years. Which was special, and Krishnaji was there, you know, like a lot of the time. He was always traveling, but he was there a lot. David Bohm was there a lot.
So this was like in the 70s?
Would have been the early 70s,
Early 70s.
Yeah.
How were your lessons with Desagachar?
Desi Achar, I liked them. We would come into the room and we'd be sitting here like this, and he would say, "How do you like living in India?"
Just small talk.
"How do you like living at the TS? How do you like the food? What do you think about the weather?" Small talk, but fun, you know, getting to know this guy. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I came halfway around the world to be here. I can only be here for an hour, you know, a couple times a week. Are we going to do yoga anytime soon? Was what I was thinking. And then at some point, I asked him a yoga question, and then he answered yoga talk. And I realized, oh wow, that's the way it works here. It was interesting because I'd gone to school and studied other stuff, and it was, as a student, it's mostly like you're being crammed with information. And here he wasn't delivering anything until I asked. Once I got that that's how it worked, I came to class with hundreds of questions. And it was fun because the curriculum that we went was based on sort of my interests and what I needed to know, and he would sort of lead me, and it was totally fun. It was very interesting, you know, it was interesting. It was a very good year for me there, yeah. Before
you go to Brockwood, you said you went to Bodhi Tree and picked up books and so on. Did you ever go to ZK in Ojai during that period?
The first place I saw Kay was here at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. Okay. I was still living at my parents' house in Palos Verdes, and I hitchhiked to come to Santa Monica. Coming to Santa Monica, it's not that far to Palos Verdes, but I don't know, I grew up on the hill over there. I heard Santa Monica seemed like a long ways away. And he was in the Civic Auditorium. There were a lot of people. He sat up on the stage with that one little chair. That was awesome. Once I knew sort of that he was around, and I heard that he was giving talks in Ojai, I would hitchhike to Ojai.
Oh.
I had a little sleeping bag, and I used to climb over somebody's fence and sleep in the backyard. You know, and then sort of like get up in the morning and go to the park where the talks were. They weren't at the Oak Grove at that point. They were in town.
The Libby Bowl?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. Did you go back to India again to study yoga or for other purposes?
And then I went back to India a second time. So the first time I was there for a year, got very sick.
Water problem.
Yeah, I got hepatitis. My friend died from the hepatitis. I remember watching him die and thinking, oh man, that's me in 2 weeks. He turned yellow, and he was trying to cure himself naturopathically. And it seemed to work. He went away and he was sort of fine, and then it just came back with a vengeance. And I remember seeing him walking down the trail, and the liver was poisoning his brain, and he was sort of like beginning to walk like this, and his speech was getting slurred, and his speech was getting slurred, and so I thought, oh wow, that's me in 2 weeks. And so I went to the hospital and got the whatever they were giving me. I think it was just cortisone shots and glucose powder. That was the treatment. But they wouldn't let me leave India. They said I was too sick to get on the plane, so I had to the last couple months that I was there, that first time, I was just sick and got very thin. So when I went back the second time, I was a little fearful. I'm going back there again. But I didn't get this sick the second time. And second time I went to study with Iyengar. A very different teaching approach. Like Desi Achar wasn't dishing it out, though he would if you asked a question. And whereas Iyengar was just the total opposite of that, just like gushing with information and information and information. And I love that. I love Desgachar. I love that. And the difference of approach was interesting, but Iyengar was so, he got me involved in a way that I hadn't been prior to that. He's known for his precision of alignment, and it was, you know, it wasn't just precision of alignment, it was like, it was involvement, it was like meditation, it was like get into it, it's like make the perfect note, like get in, sing the music, like play it beautifully. And he was a very strict teacher, and very precise that you do things, and it did get my mind involved in a way that it hadn't been prior to that. To me it felt like math.
The energy lines we were talking about, is that coming from there as well?
The energy lines came later as a way of trying to make sense of what he was talking about. Later I realized, oh wow, the energy lines is what it's about. And it's like you follow the energy and you let the energy guide you about what to do. And wherever it dings or feels right, that's what he was talking about. He wasn't talking about the lines as such. He was talking about, okay, feel the sensation there, feel the sensation there, and got very specific. And I never got where he was coming up with this awesome information, though it was getting me involved in a way that I hadn't been. And then later when I met Joel Kramer, he's the one that taught me the line of energy technique. And then I realized, oh wow, when I started making a line of energy the way Joel taught me, that when I run energy through the line and I look for the feeling of perfect flow, it was like ding, 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 ding. All the stuff that Iyengar had been talking about, specific movements, started happening without me having to think about it. And then I realized, oh wow, that's what Iyengar is doing. He's like running energy through the lines and like letting it self-correct and then talking about it. But what he's really doing is like surfing the energy. And so at that point, my yoga became more internal, because all you're doing is, like, instead of telling yourself what to do, you're listening, you're meditating, you're following the energy, you're daring to do what feels right to you. And then if you keep going where it feels right, things self-correct, and you start trusting yourself to do what's feeling right. And if you learn to do it as you're doing the yoga poses, you find yourself going out the door, walking down the street, cooking your food, and just like everything starts feeling like you're channeling it, you know.
A friend of mine who was actually a student at Brockwood as well just recently told me about myofascial unwinding. Are you familiar with this?
Semi.
Because I'm not really, I haven't studied it that deeply, but I watched a few videos and she told me about it, and it seems quite similar, where you just let the fascia do what it wants in a way.
Yeah.
But if you had to explain this energy lines to somebody, executive summary in like 2 paragraphs.
Well, the words, the quick words, this may not make sense without more prelude.
But feel free.
But the deal is you run energy down your arm, you stretch, and you immerse yourself in the experience of it, and you look for the feeling of perfect flow. And you let it with everything, with everything. And I like saying, look for the feeling of perfect flow. In my mind, that's an advanced instruction. You're telling someone what to do. Look for the feeling of perfect flow, but you're not telling them what to do, which is cool. Whereas previous teaching was put your thumb like that, put your fingers like that, put this much rotation. It was like more telling you what to do, and it was more a lower level, so to speak. extremely helpful, got me involved in a way that I hadn't been. And if Iyengar was saying, put your thumb like that, it was obvious whether I was doing it or not. And if I started to space out and my thumb wasn't doing that, he would like
hit you.
Yeah, but it was love.
Yes.
And it did make you alert, and it's like, oh. And it wasn't just the alignment. It was just in this moment it's the alignment, because it's what are you doing with your mind, essentially. And what tripped me up at the time was thinking, oh, he means my thumb should always be like that. He means my finger should always be like that. And he was insisting on that a lot, but it's more like, at the moment, put your thumb just like that, and let's see you do it, because then you get involved with it, and you can know that if you get involved with it, then the energy will start telling you what to do, and then it'll begin to morph and change. And at that point, just keep following the flow, keep surfing it. And that's stuff that you can't really tell anyone what to do, except look for the feeling. Yes, exactly.
So it's pointers, actually.
Yeah, right.
And the thumb will not become a method anymore.
Exactly.
It will be an exploration, which is Krishna what he's teaching as well.
Right. So it all started tying together at that point. And yet all the intermediate steps of do this and do that were higher than where I was coming from. They were helpful. The intermediate steps got me involved in a way that they hadn't been, but then you transcend the technique, and then your alignment becomes intuitive.
An alignment in itself, or is it aligned with something else?
I don't know. I'd have to, but interesting. But the way it was usually talked about is as though it were alignment in itself. And again, that's where people got stuck on, oh, do it this way, do it this way.
Because usually you say like, this line is parallel to this line, you know.
Right.
So it's aligned, or the axis is aligned. Whereas this is alignment with the whole being.
That's exactly, right. Yeah. So then, yes.
Okay.
So your alignment becomes, you start feeling congruent with
the whole.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Eric, you taught yoga at Brockwood for 5 years, then you came back to America?
And then I came back to the States and started teaching
yoga. You started a yoga studio here, or started privately? I
started teaching out of my house, and people would come over, and it was nice for me. I mean, I was at Brockwood and loved it, but it was like to students who were, most of them weren't into yoga, not really. And there I was, like, passionate about it, and I was always trying, like, at Brockwood, I was always trying to get the kids to be interested. And when I started teaching publicly, like, people were coming voluntarily, and that was like a different, and they're paying me. Whoa, and so like, so it was nice. I went to the ballet studio and taught there, taught out of my house. That was mostly it. I put up little flyers at the health food store. Very meager years. Didn't make very much money. I pulled it off. And I had lots of free time.
That's nice.
For me to do yoga, for me to study, for me to read. Not have to do anything that I didn't want to do. My thing was, like, my father, he had 4 kids. He wanted to be a singer, an actor. He was an awesome singer. But he had a family. And he was stuck in a job that he didn't like, and it made him bitter.
Yes, exactly.
And I remember thinking, man, I don't want to end up like Dad. And so my strategy was, wow, I'm loving this. I'm not making any money. I'm paying the bills barely, but I don't need much. I didn't have very many clothes, but I don't need much. I don't. Low overhead. And I had free time, which was what was valuable for me. I wasn't wasting my time doing something I didn't want to do. And my strategy was, I'll do this for as long as I can get away with it. And that's still my strategy.
That's the same way, actually, exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of power yoga and things like that, do you approve of this? Because my impression is, to be blunt, is that it seems like a lot of yoga has become exercise, aerobics. What do you think of that?
That's largely the perception. Most people that come to class see it as a like mystical PE class, or I'm okay with it actually. Whatever sort of gets you in the door, because like this other thing,
right?
If you can get someone to start focusing on their now experience, even if it's power yoga, even if it's this, even if it's that, if any form, for any reason, if you can get them to focus in on their now experience, no matter what brought them in the door, it will get them in touch with life live. It will take them further than
living an unattended life.
Yes, right. It'll open them up to what it's really about. I call my thing now freedom yoga.
Oh,
that's what
nice.
I call it.
I like that.
And I like that name because I didn't have a name for it for a long time. And people would ask me what sort of style do I teach, and I would go on this long, I studied with Krishnamurti, Iyengar, Tezgachar, Vonda Scarabelli, etc., Joel Kramer. But still, I didn't have a. And finally, someone said to me, "Why don't you just call it freedom style?" And I thought, hey, I like that. And then I cut out the style. I just like freedom yoga. It's a name. It's accurate.
Yes.
It's not limiting. If you get what it's about, if you get freedom yoga, how you perform it will look different than how I'm performing it. If you then go teach it, it'll look different than how I'm teaching it, and yet you'll be essentially doing the same thing. And essentially what you'll be doing, like the way I like to talk about it, it's like, the word yoga means yoke. It's like using your mind to get online. You're joining small mind with big mind. Is how I talk about it. And so, as you join yoke with the infinity of mind, the internet of mind, of awareness, you'll find yourself lifted out of your conditioning, and you'll start being the place where
I know what you mean.
Where online knowing starts flowing through.
Yeah, but that's more than yoga, in my mind. Because, like Krishnamurti said that he did yoga for physical health.
Right.
Some people are doing yoga in order to achieve enlightenment. And I think that's a trap. Because, anyway, for reasons that you already know. But, so physical is one aspect of it, and breathing, but you cannot have a mess and unite with the big internet of mind.
Well, the insight...
So your life has to, it's a holistic thing. Your whole life has to be lived in order, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, yeah, right.
If you have a messy room, you can't sit quiet and try to be quiet, for example.
So let me just say this though. Yoga, yoking, is a way of talking about it. But when you yoke, you realize, oh wow, big mind is my mind. The infinity of mind is being what I've been the whole time, is being what anything is being the whole time. I wish there was something you said a moment ago. Anyway, I forget.
Since you've studied Krishnamurti, there's a lot of popular ideas these days about me, and most of the people, including Eckhart Tolle and all the pop psychologists and gurus, that self is still there. And the me, I am it, all those things. Nevertheless, what's very unique about Kay and Rumi and others who are really great in my mind is that they talk about death of the psyche, psychological death, ending. And so, of course, using words, we have to say, use those words like me, but there is no me when there is death of the psyche, and then there is just that.
But that's the real me.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, Krishnaji was still talking, he was still expressing, he was then the clear voice of that.
Yeah, but the trap that I've seen in many circles, you go to India, pay $6,000 and get enlightened and so on and so forth, is that they use the same terminology as me and I am that. But the thing is that me is really the I, the psychological self,
I understand.
which is a bundle of memories and da 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 da.
Right. But increasingly, the realization is like that could only seem to be there because that is who they really are. That is the only thing that's going on.
But ending is key. Do you agree that there is an element of ending, death of that movement of thinking, memory,
there's
time?
Yeah, there's the ending of the misunderstanding, quick words.
Maya. Maybe.
Yeah. And at that point, it's sort of like, oh, what's been going on the whole time starts becoming the obvious truth.
And Kay talks about this otherness.
Which is the otherness.
The other movement, he also refers to it.
But you would only call it the otherness
in relationship to thisness.
Yes. And so you would talk about it as the otherness as you were learning about it, and if you were talking to an audience where that was the predominant mindset. And you talk about it because if you get them into their actual now experience, then it will cause the death of their psychological conditioning, and then that which is really true will start appearing as being what's really true. The death, I mean, that doesn't die, but misperceptions die, illusions die, and in their place is the obviousness of what's been going on the whole time, which the otherness then becomes like the thisness, or however you want to say it.
Yeah. It's many of these pop psychology schools, they ignore the fact that the mess also needs to be understood. They're all about okay, just forget about the mess, focus on the greatness.
Right.
But the key to change is to see what you are, and if you're messy, if you're jealous, if you're whatever, that needs to be seen, worked out, unfolded, and that seeing actually cleans it up, disappears, and so on. Rumi says, come out of the field of time and come into the field of love.
Right.
So the way I see it, of course, we're conditioned to think binary, double, but in that conditioning I see one movement which is time and thought and all, and then there's another movement which is the love and the infinite and all. But that other movement, which is very ignored in everyday life, it's so much there. It encompasses everything. It's very practical.
That's the thing, right. The world of time is happening in the timeless. Yeah.
Nice way of putting it. So in terms of your books, how many books have you written? The one that I have, okay. But you said you're working on a number of other projects?
I'm working on about 6 books.
Okay.
Yeah. Sort of a freedom yoga book.
Great.
But mostly I'm working on transcripts of the talks from my classes.
Okay.
I give the talk in class, I get it transcribed, and then I make it readable. And I'm learning a lot by doing that. It's a really fun
process.
It's a good process for me.